The SEC once was the greatest college football conference in the land. Is that still the case? Well, not so much as it used to be, at the very least. And at most, it looks like the SEC might be vastly overrated, particularly here the past couple seasons. We will try to separate fact from fiction on this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered, our podcast from the USA Today Network. I'm Blake Toppmeyer alongside John Adams. John, coming into this playoff, the SEC was riding pretty high. 5 playoff bids to lead all conferences and a chance to reclaim the national championship after the Big Ten had won titles the past 2 seasons, with cheating Michigan winning in 2023 and then Ohio State last season. But here we are in the semifinals, and just one SEC team left standing. That's Ole Miss. Alabama, of course, got clobbered in the Rose Bowl by Indiana. So what do we think? I mean, the anti-SECers are out. They got the knives sharpened in this moment, saying the SEC's rule is dead. But I don't know if that's hyperbole. I mean, I think you have to take the facts that are in front of us right now, and it's 2 years in a row that the SEC hasn't won a national championship, and now just one SEC team in the semifinals. I think there might be some truth here into the fact that the SEC is descending from its college football throne if it hasn't already.
Yeah, I don't think either one of us is shocked by what happened in the playoff. We've been saying pretty much all year we thought the SEC was stronger in the middle and at the bottom, whereas the Big Ten was stronger at the top. And I thought that going into the playoffs. Perhaps because of Georgia's pedigree, its recent history under Kirby Smart, a lot of people thought Georgia's coming on and beat Alabama really badly in the SEC championship game. And people are saying, yeah, I heard a lot of people say they thought Georgia was going to win the national championship. I didn't. I just don't think Georgia's as complete a team as Indiana or Ohio State. And I thought pretty much all year, Indiana, those two are the two best teams. Now, Miami has really come on strong at the end of the year. So to me, we go into the Final Four, and Ole Miss is probably, I look at it as the number 4 team, and that's from the SEC. The thing is, back when the SEC was winning 7 straight national titles from 2006 through 2012, nobody doubted it was the number 1 conference. So, and back then you weren't saying, well, it's really strong in the middle and at the bottom too. No, because you got to, if you're going to have that claim to be the number 1 conference, you got to win national titles too. That's why the SEC was perceived that way. Sure, there were other things. Does great in the NFL draft, recruits, does well in the recruiting rankings, all that good stuff. But to really achieve that elite position as unquestioned number 1 conference, you got to win it all sometimes.
Yeah, and John, I'm willing to go a step further, because I, like you, have been saying, trumpeting that chorus throughout the season, that the SEC, even if it's not as good at the top, is better than any other conference and in the middle and at the bottom. But I'm starting to rethink even that, because I know bowl games don't mean what they used to. However, I just watched Iowa beat Vanderbilt in a bowl game. I watched Illinois beat Tennessee in a bowl game. I watched LSU lose to Houston in a bowl game. Virginia beat Missouri in a bowl game. I get it. It's not 1994 where bowl games are this great culmination of the season, but it's not like Diego Pavia opted out. It's not like Joey Aguilar opted out for Tennessee. A lot of guys played in these bowl games. There were a few opt-outs, sure, but by and large, these teams had their rosters intact, and they were losing. This has been a flop of a postseason for the SEC up and down the ballot, not just in the playoff. Credit to Ole Miss for being in the semifinals. Hasn't been a flop for the Rebels. They've shined, but up and down the ballot, whether it be in the playoff or in the bowl lineup, it's pretty well been an almost unanimous flop for the SEC, with teams like Ole Miss and Texas being the exceptions to the rule. Texas beat scandal-ridden Michigan in a bowl game, but for the most part, I mean, it's just been a face planting for the SEC. So I don't know. Are you willing to join me in going a step further and saying maybe we need to reevaluate whether the SEC is really even better in the middle than what the Big Ten is? Because I think I'm ready to reevaluate that. Is the middle of the SEC really any better than Illinois, Iowa, and Minnesota? I mean, the brand name would say that the SEC should be better. The names on the jersey would say they should be better, but I don't know that I can say that anymore based on what we've seen.
No, let's go down with the ship has never been a mantra of mine. And or our podcast. I think, yeah, I think what now we need to say is the SEC is stronger at the bottom.
Their
Okay.
absolute worst team is better than the Big Ten's worst
Yeah,
team.
but then I think about Kentucky and I don't know. But no, those games that you mentioned, those bowl games to me were significant.
Mm-hmm.
And the most significant one to me was Vanderbilt because I really thought Vanderbilt might could make some noise in the playoff if it got in. Diego Pavia got my Heisman vote. He was playing spectacularly the last third of the year. Vanderbilt had a lot going on offensively. I thought it was a pretty well-rounded team, more so than I did at the first of the year when it was winning a little bit differently. But watching it against Iowa and following Iowa all year, Iowa's problem was it never can win close games. Every really good team it played, it lost by a narrow margin. It could hang with those teams, but it couldn't get over the top. I think it lost 4 games by a total of 15 points. But it goes out there and beats what was a final score? It win by 7, something like that. It was, but it was not. But it just looked like the better team.
Yeah, it wasn't a
It,
fluky win. It
no,
controlled the
no,
game.
not at
Yeah.
all. No, Iowa looked pretty good, and so that made a real impression on me, and not as much so because uh, I really thought Vanderbilt was playing well, and it's 10-2, and it's an SEC team, and it couldn't beat Iowa. And then, and you mentioned the Illinois Tennessee game. Illinois is another team that just it couldn't beat good teams. It did beat Southern Cal, but Southern Cal usually has a fluky kind of game like that. But it lost to other good teams on its schedule. I thought Tennessee, it was a good matchup for Tennessee. The losses for both teams was pretty comparable. So it's not as though the SEC was really at a disadvantage in that matchup, just like the Vanderbilt game. And Illinois was the better team. Very close game, last second, but watching the game, I just thought Illinois was better on that day. And that, yeah, you have to look at things differently when you watch those kind of games. Houston, LSU, I don't know. LSU just has a myriad of problems. That to me is a really underachieving team.
Mm-hmm.
And to lose to Houston, which is solid Big 12 team. Yeah, it didn't have Garrett Nussmeier, but Nussmeier didn't have a great year anyway. So I don't know if that would have made too much difference. So the SEC, you can't excuse these postseason losses. There's no way you can do it.
Yeah, and I think there's probably if we're in alignment here, it sounds like we are, that the SEC is not the monster that it once was, and at this point is not even it's not better than the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is proving itself as superior to the SEC. So then the next question becomes, why is that the case? And I'm going to throw a number of factors at you and see if you think I'm hitting the nail on the head here or I'm off the mark. So a number of factors I think that are influencing the SEC's descent from the throne here. Some simple ones. Well, Nick Saban won a lot of those national titles with for the SEC, and he's not coaching anymore. I don't think that's the biggest factor, but I think that's a factor. We just talked about on the podcast last week that we think the Big Ten's full lineup of coaches is better than the SEC's full lineup of coaches. There are some really good coaches at the top of the SEC, but I think full lineup of coaches, the Big Ten is better. But I think the even bigger reasons why the SEC doesn't rule the sport in the way that it once did, high school recruiting doesn't matter as much as it used to. When this was a sport run by high school recruiting, there's a lot of talent in the southeast part of the country. So there were some geographic advantages for the SEC. And I also think maybe there was some SEC schools that were willing to do a few things to get high school recruits that maybe some schools elsewhere weren't as willing or as skilled at doing, if you catch my drift. And now everybody can buy recruits. And so I don't think high school recruiting means as much as it used to. So the SEC's geographic and facilities advantages, I don't think matter as much, nor do their advantages on how they used to get some of those high school recruits. And also, you have programs elsewhere like Indiana that can just buy good players out of the portal, like Texas Tech. Texas Tech bowed out in the quarterfinals, but they still had a really good defense. And now they're getting one of the best transfer quarterbacks in the portal sweepstakes by having a lot of resources. So I think you add all those things up, some coaching departures from the SEC, the de-emphasis in high school recruiting, or at least what it means in ruling the sport, the fact that everybody's buying players now with above board NIL, and the fact that transfer talent can prop up programs that never would have had any chance of competing for a national championship before, like Indiana. You add it all up, and I think that points to why the SEC no longer has a stranglehold on this sport.
Yeah, so basically you're saying the SEC needs to go back to good old days of rampant cheating.
I mean, it worked for Michigan a couple years ago. Maybe they need to find new ways to cheat.
Yeah. But you're right. The SEC, I'm not sure the SEC, I know a lot of the fans of SEC teams haven't grasped how immense the change has been, how everything is so different now. I think one of the things that favored the SEC previously was if you went to play at an SEC school, the competition level would be better.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was, prove yourself in. It's kind of like if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. If you make it in the SEC, you can make it anywhere. So it was a proving ground. And so you look at the NFL draft, more SEC guys got picked. So if you're an offensive tackle, you want to compete against an elite pass rusher. That will enhance your status as far as the draft goes. Now, though, that doesn't matter as much. It's money talks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can go compete against a future NFL pass rusher at the SEC, but Mike can do that in the Big 12 too, and I can make more money playing for Texas Tech than I can for Alabama.
Well, that's right. I mean, the real money years ago was in the NFL. Even if you were getting some money under the table to play for wherever you were and driving a Dodge Charger, or which maybe came to you by dubious reasons, the real money was in the NFL. And now there's some very real money flying around in college football, and it's not just in the SEC. So I think you make a great point, John. Like, if you wanted to make that real NFL money before, what better way to do that than to go to the SEC, play against all these future NFL draft picks, and show that, hey, I'm a first round guy. I'm going up against future NFL guys right here and now. Pick me in the first round and cut me the check, and let's go. Now that check can be cut while you're playing in West Texas for Cody Campbell or wherever. Everybody's got money now. It's not that the SEC schools are broke, but they're not the only ones with money, especially now that it's flowing above the table. And something else I'm struck by, John, is as you look at these semifinalists, is none of them are starting quarterbacks that they signed at a high school. All four of these finalists have a transfer quarterback. Three of the four, the transfers in his first season at his new school. Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss, Carson Beck at Miami, and then Fernando Mendoza at Indiana. All those guys are first-year transfers as quarterbacks at their current school. And then you look at Dante Moore is a transfer for Oregon. He's just not in his first season there. So at the game's most important position, it's like, you acquire a guy out of the portal, and we're seeing this in the sweepstakes right now with the portal being open. But it's not like the old days where you had to go out and sign a 5-star guy and develop him for a couple years, and then maybe by the time he's a redshirt sophomore or junior, he's ready to take the reins, and it's a battle of the 5 stars in which the SEC had the great advantage. Now you could sign a top 10 recruiting class and miss the playoff. That's just the reality of it. Doesn't mean that way is broken. I mean, Georgia's still having a lot of success with that model, and we're right there in the fourth quarter with Ole Miss. But it's not the only way to do it now. There's more than one way to skin a cat, and that's from Ole Miss to Indiana. I think that's allowing programs that never could have contended for a national championship realistically before to go chase one now.
Well, yeah, you can not just sign a top 10 class and finish out of the playoffs. You could sign 4 consecutive top 10 classes and not make the playoffs. It's so different now. It's almost as though develop. That's kind of a. I think some programs probably snicker when you start about, well, we're going to develop our players. Well, go ahead, and if they're good enough, we'll take them. Because what does that do for you? Particularly at quarterback. I go back to last year in the championship game and with Ohio State, certainly with Will Howard, the Kansas State transfer, Riley Leonard at Notre Dame from Duke with transfer. That's the way to win now. I think when you're starting that young quarterback, and kind of was the difference when Ohio State played Indiana, and you could say it was the difference when Ohio State played Miami too. Julian Sayin, a highly recruited, highly regarded young player, first year as a starter, a redshirt freshman. Yeah, he's got some talent, and he did okay against Miami, but he looked overmatched against Indiana, and it was just to compare him to what was going on the other side of the ball with Carson Beck. I've never been a big fan, but he managed that game really well. He played within himself in that game. He didn't make any stupid mistakes, which I expected him to make. And that was kind of the difference in the game because he's got a lot of talent around him. I thought his experience showed in that game. And I certainly think Mendoza's experiences showed for Indiana this year. We've seen him in the clutch raise his level of play. He just seems to have such a firm grasp of what's going on everywhere in the field. So experience matters so much now. And if you want to develop your quarterback, go ahead. And by the time he's fully developed, he may be in Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah, or playing for Kurt Cignetti and the Hoosiers in line to nab Josh Hoover, the star quarterback from TCU. So I want to get to Ole Miss in a moment, John, because they certainly deserve a little bit of our time for what they've done in reaching the semifinals. But before we leave this topic of the overrated SEC, I wanted to ask you about Alabama. I wrote a column a few days ago about saying Alabama is basically Illinois now. In line with our discussion about the overrated SEC, you look at what they've done the last seasons. And Alabama stepped on the field against Illinois, probably would have been about a three-point spread. And I might have taken the Illini in the points there after what I saw in the Rose Bowl. And it's really been a seesawing season for Alabama. There's been times where Kalen DeBoer was sort of the toast of the sport, particularly when Alabama beat Georgia and Kirby Smart during the regular season. And then at other times they were really down, including the SEC championship, but then they got back off the mat and win a playoff game. But then now it wasn't just that they lost, John. I thought, a lot of Alabama fans would not accept losing to Indiana under any circumstances. But I do think there's probably a portion of that fan base that is smart enough to realize that this is a really good Indiana team, even though Indiana's history suggests that they shouldn't beat Alabama. Why does history matter anymore? It doesn't. And so if Alabama would have been competitive in that game and given you signs that this thing is still headed in the right direction and year 3 could be like a crescendo for Kalen DeBoer, well, then I don't think it would be so negative in Alabama right now. But it wasn't that. It was an absolute beatdown in the way that Indiana beat down Illinois earlier this season. It was like a sequel to that game. And so it made me think that Alabama is closer to Illinois than it is to the top of the sport right now. And that's got to be concerning for Tide fans. So how would you sort of kind of put into words where Alabama sits with Kalen DeBoer now as he enters an offseason ahead of year 3. I think facing some real pressure.
Oh, I think he's definitely facing pressure, in part because Alabama, the fan base there feels so entitled, as though it's supposed to be in the middle of a dynasty.
Mm.
Those days are gone. Um, and they had the dynasty under Nick Saban and then earlier under Bear Bryant, but that's no more. And they don't have any real advantages right now. But the thing about it is the image, it doesn't have the same image it did. Back there, Alabama didn't win the national title every year when Nick Saban was there. It fell short sometimes. But even when it did, you still looked at it like it's Alabama. You just can't count Alabama out. It'll bounce back. But I look at it now, and it just the nature of its losses, being overwhelmed by Indiana, but not just Indiana. Georgia manhandled it in the SEC championship game, and then go back to that season opener. You could say that was a total fluke, but I really don't think it was. Florida State went out. It didn't just beat Alabama, it beat it decisively. It was a 2-touchdown game. It was clearly the better team on that day. And Florida State wasn't even a very good team, as we found out. But what does that say about Alabama? The problem was in the old days when Alabama wasn't as good as it at playing at a championship level, it was still Alabama, and you felt like, well, this won't last longer. Not now. I mean, it doesn't look like those. It just looks like, gosh, like you said, it looks kind of like Illinois. It might lose by 17 points to somebody. In the
Makes me
old days, it wouldn't happen that way.
makes me wonder, John, how much different would it look if Nick Saban were still the coach? Because I think a lot of Alabama fans are probably wondering. Not that it matters, because I don't think Nick Saban's coming out of retirement to save this thing. But what I'm wondering is, would it even make a difference? Because of course, in the last era of the sport, nobody was better than Nick Saban. He I don't think there's any debate over that. Certainly in the modern era, under the last model, Saban did it best. But he didn't win a national title in this NIL transfer free agency era. Now, Alabama was still up there toward the top of the sport, but his final national title came pre NIL. And I'm just wondering now, is this like a absence of Saban problem? Is the real issue here going from Saban to DeBoer, or would it even make that much difference? Could you call Nick Saban out of retirement tomorrow and solve all that ails Alabama? Or is this just Alabama's new reality in the NIL transfer world? How much of a difference do you think calling Saban out of retirement, implausible that may be, would make for Alabama?
Nick Saban left the sport. He retired from college football for a reason. And that's what you're talking about. It wouldn't make a difference because Nick Saban didn't like this era. He couldn't control his talent base as well. He didn't like dealing with the transfer portal. He could do it for a while, but he really didn't like it, and he was losing. He was losing an edge. I don't think it would. I don't put this on Kalen DeBoer. I question. I maybe have lowered my opinion somewhat of Kalen DeBoer as a coach because of what's happened at Alabama in his first 2 seasons there. But no, that's not the main problem. The main problem is it's the amassing talent. Nick Saban thrived in an era when one of his linebackers got hurt. He would bring in another linebacker who might be even better. He just didn't have as much experience. You can't do that with the prevalence of the portal now. Guys don't stick around. They don't want to be a backup for a year or 2 or maybe even 3 like they did in the old days. They're going elsewhere where they can make more money. And I don't think Alabama anymore has that kind of advantage that it had under Saban. So no, I don't think it would make any. If Nick Saban would have been coaching this team, no, it would have made the playoff. I mean, it wouldn't have done any more than it did. when I look at both, when you look at Alabama and Oklahoma this year from the SEC, because we're talking about, hey, the SEC put 5 teams in the playoff. Yeah, it put them in the playoff. But did you really think Alabama or Oklahoma could win the national championship? I didn't.
Not by the time we got to Selection Sunday. Maybe when Alabama was beating Georgia, I might have thought that back in late September.
No, but
After,
by the end of the
yeah,
year,
by the end of the year, no. I mean, I was there on hand in person to watch the Iron Bowl, in which I didn't. Alabama won, but I did not think Alabama looked like a playoff team. And then I was in person again to watch them get blown out by Georgia in Mercedes Benz, and I thought I think they were going to make the playoff. That's what I thought. I thought they have the metrics, and I didn't think the committee would want to drop the SEC's runner-up. But as I watched them play that day, I thought this does not look like a playoff team. Looks like a top 25 team. Doesn't look like a playoff team. And I think that showed in the playoff. I mean, heck, maybe the only reason Alabama won a playoff game is because it was playing another SEC team in round one. If it had been playing Oregon, Alabama probably would have been knocked out of the playoff in round one. We wouldn't even be having this conversation right now because they would have lost a month ago.
well, when you look at both those teams, neither one of them had a great running game. Oklahoma's running pretty much consisted of John Mateer's quarterback scrambling for yardage and bouncing off tacklers and fighting for every yard. But it didn't have an elite running back. This is a program whose history you go back and all those Heisman Trophy winners and candidates that played for Oklahoma. You look at Alabama and you think about Mark Ingram, Derrick Henry, all those great running backs. And that alone, when I look at those two storied programs and I say, where are the running backs? Where's the running game? They were so deficient in that area that was too much to overcome. And you look at these other teams in the playoff, Miami, Oregon, Ohio State, and Indiana. They all look like more complete teams than the SEC teams did.
Mm-hmm. Well, how complete is Ole Miss starting to look, John? Because I want to go there next. You mentioned that of these semifinalists, you might put Ole Miss as the fourth best team. That being said, I thought what they did against Georgia was incredibly impressive, worthy of all the praise. Trinidad Chambliss was fantastic, and the defense, while not a brick wall, was better than the last time they played Georgia. The defense did enough. Georgia had some self-inflicted wounds. They went into panic mode by stupidly snapping the ball on fourth down deep inside their own territory and turning a 3-point deficit into a 10-point deficit in the blink of an eye. So Georgia contributed to it, but Ole Miss, I thought particularly in the second half, played great. Pete Golding did not. It wasn't a perfectly managed game by Pete Golding. He had some flubs, but you have to say that guy's kept this team together throughout 2 playoff games. They're highly motivated playing for Pete Golding. I don't know how well he'll build it in the future. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying we don't have the evidence yet to know whether he can build a team the way Lane Kiffin did. But as far as keeping his team united and motivated, a lot of credit there to Pete Golding, a lot of credit to this team. Are you giving Ole Miss a shot to win the national title, or do you think the fairy tale's going to be ending sooner rather than later?
Well, I think it'll end sooner rather than later. I wouldn't rule out it beating Miami. That's possible. I just don't see it beating Indiana or Oregon, the winner of that game. When I look at Ole Miss, though, we know about its defensive deficiencies, but when you look at Ole Miss and look at its offensive skill players, compare them to Oklahoma, Alabama, Georgia. I'd rather have Ole Miss's quarterback, Ole Miss's running back, and Ole Miss's receivers. All of them.
Yeah. Skill position talent. Ole Miss is they're if they're second to somebody, it's not that far behind. I mean, there's a lot of skill position talent when you look in these semifinals. I think we were discussing this before we hit record here offline. We were discussing the wide receiver talent in these semifinals. I mean, we always talk about if you have a quarterback, you have a chance. I think the other thing we're starting to learn in this modern era of college football, if you have a great crop of wide receivers, you've got a chance there too. You go back to last year's Ohio State team that won with the best collection of wide receivers in the country, and then this year, boy, the wide receiver talent on these four teams in the semifinals is supreme. And Ole Miss has, as you mentioned, has some great ones. Kewan Lacey is the running back. Is excellent, one of the best running backs in the country. And then what a story Trinidad Chambliss has become. I think when he took over as the quarterback, a lot of people thought, well, this is a neat story. This guy can run around a little bit, dual threat guy, but how far can it go? And no, I mean, he's playing like a complete quarterback. He's not just a running quarterback. Of course, he's mobile. Of course, he can extend plays. But man, that guy threw some seeds against Georgia. I mean, just downfield shots right on the money. Gunnar Stockton played pretty well. Trinidad Chambliss played excellent. And I tell you what I thought as I was watching Trinidad Chambliss lead that comeback, John. I thought I wish I had my Heisman ballot back. I mean, truly. I'm not sure if I would have voted him number one, but as I watched him lead that rally, complete 13 consecutive passes against Georgia, extend plays, turn what would be sacks into downfield completions, I thought, man, I'd love to have my Heisman ballot back because I'd have Trinidad Chambliss somewhere on that ballot.
Yeah, the thing about him was he made all the throws, but he also seems to have that intangible quality. He can turn a bad play into a great play.
Yeah.
And that's, you go back and look at the best quarterbacks in the SEC, the Cam Newton, Tim Tebow, all those guys, Joe Burrow, they all had that ability, and he does that too. So that's why you really can't count them out. Uh, you know, the game I always think about when quarterbacks come to mind is that when I covered that Southern Cal Texas, that epic game where Vince Young just won the game. I mean, he was playing against an elite team, and he rose way above that team. He rose way above Southern Cal's defense. He was so good. He was unstoppable. I thought about that watching Chambliss play against Georgia. Georgia's not as good as that Southern Cal team was. I also thought about, since he was wearing an Ole Miss uniform, really dating myself here, but I thought about Archie Manning when he ran 20 yards behind the line of scrimmage. Archie Manning just scrambled all over the field, never got tired, threw the ball on the run, and hit his receiver. That's what he was doing. He was really fun to watch. And boy, you get a quarterback like that. And think about this too, Blake. Every intangible kind of favors Ole Miss now.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the other three teams, I know Miami came on late and barely made the playoff, but when you watch it play, talk about its defensive front, its running back, it's got playmakers too, all that good stuff. When you look at it, you look at Oregon, Indiana, seemingly complete teams. Ole Miss is really kind of the outlier. It's like, well, it's got a scrappy defense. The defense is playing better, but it can't take over the line of scrimmage. It can't dominate. But I think that kind of fuels Ole Miss's fire, that people still doubt Ole Miss. And then, as you wrote so well in your column about Lane Kiffin a while back, that's great incentive. They want to show Lane Kiffin that how wrong he was. He's looking for a national championship. Well, you should have looked in your backyard when your backyard was in Oxford, Mississippi, not in Baton Rouge.
Yeah, I wonder about what Lane Kiffin might be thinking right now, John, because I really do believe that. I don't think he would have left Ole Miss for LSU if he thought that this team could win a national title. I'm not saying that's the only reason he left, but I think if he thought truly that this team could win the whole thing, I think he would have stayed at Ole Miss. And now here they are in the semifinals. Yeah, they're an underdog, but a slight betting underdog against Miami. And heck, they were the underdog against Georgia and won. Do you think, he'll never say it, but do you think, or he won't say it now, maybe years down the road he would, but do you think Lane might be regretting his choice to leave Ole Miss, or do you think he's still riding the LSU high and saying, well, my time's coming. I'll win one, if not more, national titles at LSU in the years to come?
That's what he'll say.
Hmm.
and that's what he'll tell people. But if Ole Miss wins a national championship, how could he not regret what he did?
And he's had some infamous exits before, John. I mean, one of them, I mean, you covered Tennessee, you know as well as anyone. The one he left with Tennessee in the middle of the night with the city literally burning, fired at the airport at Southern Cal. Al Davis, back to Kiffin's brief NFL stint as a head coach, Al Davis fired him complete with a full slideshow, basically just tearing down Lane Kiffin as an entire human. And telling you all the things that he didn't like about the man, not just as a coach, but as a member
As
of
a
his
human being.
species. Yeah, as a representative of the human race, Al Davis took him apart in a slideshow, and so he's had some infamous exits. Lane Kiffin has. I mean, heck, you even as his time as offensive coordinator at Alabama, when he was leaving for FAU, sort of a messy breakup with Alabama. They're preparing for the national championship. So, I mean, there's been some truly only Kiffin could serve them moments, but this might be the all timer if Ole Miss were to go on to win the national championship of just infamous Lane Kiffin exits. If he leaves his team before the playoff and then they win the whole thing, I think that might even trump Knoxville burning and Al
Oh,
Davis's slideshow and the whole bit.
yeah, I always liked Al Davis, and that slideshow was pretty impressive. But you're right, because it's just the idea, just abandoning your team. And I know he wanted to keep coaching it, but I understand we talked about this a lot, but I understand why Ole Miss didn't want him to coach. You couldn't trust him. How could you trust him? Um, but yeah, because he's made it all about winning a national title, and this team now is 2 wins away. And the line is close enough against Miami where you say it's kind of a toss up. So let's say Ole Miss pulls off a mild upset. Anything can happen in one game. Anything. Maybe Indiana would manhandle Ole Miss the way it did Alabama, but I don't think so. I think because of Ole Miss's offense,
Mm-hmm.
think about the second half of the season, what we saw in Georgia. First part of the season, Georgia's defense didn't look like a Kirby Smart defense. Tennessee put over 40 points up on it. But then at the end of the year, kept thinking, "Yep, yeah, this is the Georgia defense of old," and that's why so many people were starting to think, Georgia might win this whole thing again. But then it came up against a really big time offense, and it looked like it did in the first part of the season. It couldn't stop Ole Miss. That makes me think Ole Miss can hang with these teams. I wouldn't favor it to win the national title, but I wouldn't favor it to get blown out by any of these teams in the playoff.
And so obviously you have a pecking order of the teams that can win it, but do you think all four of these teams could win it? Let's say 10% chance or better. Would you give all four of these semifinalists a 10% chance or better or no?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And that makes for a really interesting semifinal, I think. I mean,
Sure.
that's what's interesting is you don't have the blue bloods in this semifinal, so maybe this isn't the semifinal that the television networks at ESPN would draw up, but I really don't care what ESPN would draw up. They're not signing my paychecks, and I don't really care about TV ratings. That doesn't really affect me. I'm going to watch these games. I'm going to cover a couple of these games. College football fans, the diehards, are going to watch these games. So who cares about TV ratings? I think this is a pretty darn good, pretty bang up semifinals. I don't know about you. I mean, we just said it. All four teams have at least a 10% chance of winning the whole thing. You got contrasting styles. I mean, Ole Miss is sort of the offensive team. Miami's a little bit more of the defensive team. In that semifinal, you got the rematch on the other side of Indiana. Oregon, Indiana, just a great story with Kurt Signetti and their transfer quarterback Fernando Mendoza. I don't know. Overall, I kind of like this semifinal, even though it is devoid of blue bloods. That's not an anti blue blood rant. I'm fine with there were some blue bloods in the semifinals. I just want to see three good games from here forward and have some interesting storylines. And I think this semifinals provides it, even though I mean I guess Miami would maybe be the bluest blooded program, but it's not like Miami's heyday came decades ago
Yeah.
now.
Yeah, I don't think of Miami that way, even though it had a long stretch of domination in college football. But when I look at these teams and I just watching Indiana dismantle Alabama, it looked like the blue blood. It looked like it had been there. The talk going into that game was how everybody with the bye was losing. As though sitting out an extra week just made you so vulnerable to defeat, as though you couldn't handle that. Didn't phase Indiana, took control right away and held it the whole time. It looked like old Alabama teams used to look. It looked like an Alabama national championship team, just a complete team. Uh, Oregon really impressed me. I thought Texas Tech could beat Oregon, and its offense couldn't budge, couldn't budge Oregon's defense. So I'm really looking forward to these games. Um, I think they're going to be fun. And Ole Miss, yeah, it's it's the underdog, but it's been the underdog,
Yeah.
and but the underdog might have the best player.
If you could have your Heisman ballot back, John, would you think about putting Chambliss on? I mean, it's irrelevant because the Heisman's a regular season award, and Chambliss was great during the regular season. But I thought the players I voted for were great too. But I just, like I said, I was really struck by that as I was watching that playoff game. Is if I could have my ballot back, I'd find a spot for him.
I would probably have it three quarterbacks, all the quarterbacks who Fernando Mendoza of Indiana, who won the award,
Mm-hmm.
very deserving. Diego Pavia Vanderbilt and Trinidad Chambliss, who much like Pavia had an ability to lift his team, who played well in the clutch and produced outrageous numbers. He just didn't. He didn't start off as a starter, and that's and he's the ultimate dog underdog like Pavia is. So yeah, he would be. Yeah, I would have probably had those three quarterbacks all on my ballot now if I did it. And I don't understand why they can't do that. Why they can't decide the Heisman at the end of the season instead of. I guess it has something to do with TV, and that usually
Yeah.
what
Probably rules of sport, something to televise
yeah
in that
what
period there between the conference championship weekend and the playoffs starting. But yeah, the one downside to moving the Heisman is I think you would sorely handicap any of the contenders who weren't in the playoff. You know, Pavia would have become an even greater long shot if the Heisman was a postseason awarded after the postseason. But yeah, it's not a hill I'm going to die on. I'm fine leaving it where it is. I'd probably be fine if they shifted it. I just thought, you know, after seeing Chambliss in that game against Georgia, and he played great against Tulane too. It just didn't impress me as much because I expected Ole Miss would win in a rout in that game. But the way he's played in this playoff, I think I would think seriously about finding a spot for him on my ballot. So, all right, let's get to our semifinal picks, John. If you can believe this, we are both above 500 in our picks against the spread with 3 games to go. I don't know if there's ever been a year where we both finished above 500. Now, you are guaranteed to finish above 500. You could go 0-3 in the semifinals of the national championship. You would still finish above 500. I've got work left to do. I went 3-1 in the quarterfinals. I am 42-41 overall. You went 2-2 in the quarterfinals, so you are 44-39. So you've got a 2-game lead on me, but you are assured of finishing above 500. I could still blow it and finish below 500. So the 2 games, of course, in the semifinals, Indiana is a 4-point favorite against Oregon, and Miami is a 3.5-point favorite against Ole Miss. So I'll have you pick first in the Indiana Oregon game, John, and then I will pick first in the Peach Bowl with Ole Miss and Miami.
Well, I like Indiana to win the game, but I think Oregon so impressed me against Texas Tech the way its defense played. So I will take the points. If it was 3 points, I would take Indiana, but with more than three, I've got to go with Oregon there.
Yeah, this is a tough call. I'm going to go the other way with Indiana, although I don't think it will be a blowout. I think I'm sort of banking maybe on that 7 to 10 point margin being the winning number for Indiana. But both these lines kind of scare me a little bit. But I will take Indiana and give the 4 points, which takes us to the Peach Bowl, a game I'm covering. Um, Wait, that was the Peach Bowl. The other one is the Fiesta Bowl, the game I'm not covering. Forget which way I'm going in the semifinals. It's been a long season, John. But the Fiesta Bowl between Miami and Ole Miss. Miami, the 3.5 point favorite. This game feels kind of like a coin flip to me. I love Miami's defense as much as I like any of the defenses left in this field. I mean, they've proven themselves time and again. The offense does just enough. I love the Miami wide receivers, but really it's the defense, and in particular that defensive front. I mean, Ruben Bain is the disruptor in chief. So I like what they got going on defensively. I just don't know. They really haven't faced an offense like Ole Miss's this season. They faced some good offenses, but they haven't faced an offense quite like this. So I think that could give them some challenges. Ole Miss really just needs to give Trinidad Chambliss enough protection and let those wide receivers go to work. So game that could go either way. So I think I'm going to take the underdog and get the 3.5 points since I don't feel with strong conviction about who's going to win straight up. I'll take the points and take Ole Miss plus 3.5.
Well, I kind of look at that game the way you do. I think Miami will win the game, but I can see it being a 3-point game. We talk about how good Miami's defense has been, but again, Ole Miss's offense. I don't know if anybody can put that offense to sleep. It's just got too many weapons, and I still, even though Carson Beck did just what he needed to do against Ohio State, he played within himself. He didn't make mistakes. I still think Ole Miss has a quarterback advantage in that game. And so I would take Ole Miss in the points.
All right. Well, that means you're going to keep your lead on me, John, because we only diverged on one game. You got a 2-game lead, but if I can go 2-0 this week, I would go into the national championship game with a chance to tie you. I know all of our listeners are clinging to that potential moment.
I'm more interested in finishing above 500 than beating you. Okay.
Fair enough. Given our track record, that's probably a worthy goal there. So, all right. Well, enjoy the semifinals. We will be back to discuss next week. Thanks for listening to this edition of SEC Football Unfiltered.